Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we'll be talking about threads. Now this tutorial might sound a bit complex, and that is because it is, but it is extremely crucial for us to learn threads while developing an Android application, and we especially use threads while creating Android games or any other complex application which requires a lot of processes running in the background. So basically, in order to understand threads, you need to pay close attention to what I am saying. So a simple definition of thread would be that a thread is a simple path of execution. So for example, if you go to this main activity.java file right over here, uh, but before that I need to mention that I have created a new project and I have selected the API level 15 and I have named my application as my thread app. And if you switch on to the Java class of this main activity, as you could see that there are multiple lines of code written over here. So basically we have our imports here, and then we have our main activity which extends the app compat activity, and a thread is basically a path of execution. So whenever your program executes, what happens is that whenever your application executes, what happens is that the computer is going to create a thread for your application or the thread for your code, and that thread is called as the main thread, and it is going to execute your code in the top down fashion. So your code is going to start executing from here. It is going to go down line by line. It is going to compile the code, and then it is going to execute the code depending upon the instructions which you have specified inside the code. So the basic flow of execution is from top to bottom. So your code starts from here, executes each line one by one, and then finally ends over here. So what happens is that whenever your application is running, it is going to create a main thread, and the main thread is going to execute. Now in order to get a better understanding of threads, let's assume that you have a line of code or a block of code right over here which is taking a lot of time for execution. So what happens is that unless and until this block right here is not going to get executed, the code which is written in front of us or the code which is written after it is not going to execute at all. This piece of code is going to wait forever for this piece of code to end. So in order to avoid that situation, what we do is that we make the use of threads. So basically what happens is that apart from this main thread, we have one more thread which is running in parallel to it. So we put some piece of code on the second thread which we have created. So now we have two threads. The first thread is going to execute the main part, and the second thread which is going in parallel is going to execute the second part. So in that way we could ensure a proper execution of our application. So in this tutorial what we are trying to do is that we will try and make an application and we'll make it crash on purpose. And when it crashes, what we are going to do is that we are going to create a thread, and we are going to learn how threads could be used in order to avoid the crashing of the application. So the first thing which we do is that we go into our content mail.xml, then we delete this text view right here, and that is because we won't be needing it. And then basically what we'll do is that we'll have some text over here, and we'll have a button, and whenever we click a button, this text is going to change, and this is the basic process we are trying to attempt, and of course it will execute, and that is because it is a simple process. But in order to make the application crash, what we are going to do is that we are going to write in some code which is going to delay the execution of this method right here. In order to do that, we are going to make use of the function which is called as the current time. So let's get started with the tutorial. So the first thing which we'll need to do is that we'll need a large text onto our screen, so we drag it and drop it here, and then we'll need a button, so we also drag and drop it here. And now the next thing which we'll need to do is that we need to change the text, so go to here and go to properties and change the text to, let's say, hello, and let's change this text to click me. So let this be click me. Alright, once we have the text changed, the next thing which we'll need to do is that we need to set the IDs of these text view and the button. And by now you might have understood why we give an ID to the text view as well as the button. So the major purpose of giving IDs to these widgets over here is basically in order to get a reference to them whenever we are working with them in the Java code. So we select the text view and then we go to ID and let's name this as my text, and let's give an ID to the button as well. So let's say the ID of the button is my button. Okay, once we have this set up, the next thing which we do is that we add an on click to this button right here. So whenever a button is clicked, we need to add a method which is going to execute. So we select it, go to properties and scroll down here, and as you could see, this is the on click. So let's specify some method into it. So let's type in click my button. So let's say we name the method as click my button, which we are going to write soon. So once everything is set up, the next thing which we do is that we go to the main activity.java, which is our Java class, and we delete the code which we won't be needing. So delete this. Alright, now the next thing which we do is that we need to create the function which we have defined in the on click of this button. So we go right here and we go outside this on create, and we are going to create our function here. So we type public void, and the name of our function was click my button. And if you are not sure what the name of your function was, so you simply go to this content mail.xml, switch to the text view, and as you could see, Android on click equals, this is our method name. So if you have some confusion, you simply copy this name, return here, and in order to confirm that this is your name, just paste it over here. Okay, now once we have the function name, the next thing which we do is that we pass on parameters. So parameter is going to be view, and then we are going to define this function. So the first thing which we'll need to do is that let's say we want to introduce a delay inside this function, so that whenever the button is clicked, an action is going to occur, but the action is going to occur after some delay. So let's go ahead and create some delay. So let's first get the system time and store it in some variable. So in order to store the time, we use the type long. So we type long, and let's say future time equals system dot current time, and this current time function is basically going to give you the current time in milliseconds. So now let's say we have to introduce a delay of 10 seconds. So for typing in 10 seconds, we have to convert it into milliseconds. So 10 seconds is basically 10,000 milliseconds. So to the future time, we add 10,000 milliseconds. So we type plus 10,000, and once this is done, we execute a for loop, like when the system's current time is less than the future time. So for this condition, we are going to execute some code. So we type while system dot current time is less than the future time, then we are going to execute some code, and inside it we are going to make this thing wait. So the first thing which we'll need to do is that we will need to use the synchronized keyword. So we type synchronized, and to this we pass the parameter this, and that is because we are going to deal with this object. And the synchronized keyword is basically a keyword which is used to prevent multiple threads from crashing into each other. So we use it, and then finally inside this synchronized function we are going to have a try and catch block. So we type try, then we type in the code for try, and if we have an exception, we need to catch it. So we type catch exception, let's name it as E, and we catch the exception. Alright, then the next thing which we do is that we need to make the system wait inside the try block. So we type the wait function, and it is going to take in the parameters. So we want to make it wait for the difference between the future time and the system's current time. So we type future time minus, and I think I have misspelled future time here. FUTU, this should be T, and this also should be T. Once this is corrected, we switch on to this wait method, and inside it we type future time minus system dot current time. Now even if you don't understand what we have done here in this code, is that basically we want to make the application crash. So in order to make it crash, we have written some function which is going to cause a delay, and that delay is eventually going to crash our application. And also there are multiple methods by which you could introduce a delay, but I found this method to be useful in order to crash the application, so I have used it. And the next thing which we'll need to do is that we also need to introduce some other code which is going to execute. So let's say we want to change the text of this when we click this button right here. So we switch to the Java code, and this is our catch block, and after the catch block we go 2 brackets down here, and here we type in the code which we need for the application to change the text. So we type text view to get a reference, and let's name it as my text equals text view. Then we type find view by id r dot id dot, and the name of our text view is my text, so we get a reference to it. Now the next thing which we do is that we set the text to something else, so we type my text dot set text, and set text is basically a method which is used to change text. And let's say we type in button clicked. Okay, now once we have this code, we are done with the application. Now let's go ahead and save the code, and let's execute this application onto our emulator. So as you could see, our application is up and running on the emulator, and we have our text field right here, or the text view right here, and we have the button right here. So whenever we click this button, click me over here, it is going to cause a delay, and the text is going to take a while to change, and after 10 seconds the text is going to change to button clicked. And eventually, if you keep on clicking this button right here, your application is eventually going to crash. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.